Game 4 of the World Series is in the books, and thankfully, it's not an extra inning game. Your pal Sully needs some sleep.
You are Locked On MLB, your daily MLB podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, baseball fans, and welcome to Locked On MLB, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. This is the daily podcast. We talk about all of Major League Baseball. I am your host, Paul Francis Sullivan. Please call me Sully. Follow us at Locked On MLB Pods on Twitter or whatever they call it these days, and on Instagram. I'm your pal Sully. I'm at Sully Baseball Podcast on Instagram, but the best way to get a hold of me is right here on the YouTube page. And make sure to use that hashtag EverydaySully when you comment on here. Hey, today's episode is brought to you by our good friends over at FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5. And if your bet wins, you get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. Download the app today for the FanDuel. And let's go over the trivia question, which was, who was the first player to hit a World Series home run for three different franchises? Unbeknownst to me, because I was listening to the radio broadcast for the last 8 innings of the game yesterday. Evidently, they said this on Fox, and I didn't know this. So a couple of people got it right, including GRT Hughes, who is an everyday Sully listener, who said the trivia question was Matt Williams. Matt Williams hit a home run with the 89 Giants, the 97 Twins, and the 2001 Arizona Diamondbacks. And it's interesting. Matt Williams, not only three different teams and three different pennant winners, but in three different decades. The 80s, the 90s, the 2000s. Sounds like a soft rock station. Playing all the home runs of the World Series in the 80s, 90s, 2000s, and today. Yeah, I mean, here, it's funny. I went in, as you know, I do this podcast, and I'm also a teacher, special education teacher in Pasadena High School. And one of the reasons why I'm not a Dodger fan by any stretch of the imagination. I appreciate great players. I appreciate greatness. And it's also kind of fun when the local team does well here because more people want to talk about baseball. And coming to work the day after the 18-inning marathon, everybody was talking about it. Everybody, every conversation that was going on with Ms. Ramirez, the wonderful attendants and receptionists at the Pasadena High School, all of my teacher assistants, all of the other teachers, everyone working in every classroom, and all of my, a bunch of my students, including Dee, who is my baseball loving student, and another student who I'll just call Jay, who's a very sweet young girl in my class, who's on the spectrum, who likes to wear a Dodger hat, and D, who is the young boy who is a huge Dodger fan, has been in my class now for 4 years, and Jay, at one point, we're talking about the Dodger game, and you haven't seen joy until you see two kids on the spectrum loving their Dodgers, talking baseball. I wish I could have recorded it because that would have been today's episode of Locked On MLB. But there's the other thing. The game lasted till midnight here. It was 3:00 in the morning in New York. And I was walking, I said, the amazing thing about baseball is they have to play the next day. And I was looking around going like, I don't know if my body can take another extra inning marathon. And I thought what could the one thing that Shohei Ohtani could do that would sort of elevate this story of his greatness to a new height? And that would have been if he came out the day after an 18-inning game and pitched a victory, pitched the Dodgers to the victory. And he didn't. He pitched pretty well. He pitched into the 7th. And the game, which was 18 innings long, needed someone to give them some length. This couldn't turn into another GD bullpen game. But do you know what? An interesting thing happened. Yesterday was a showcase for Shohei Ohtani, an all-time showcase. But today, Vladimir Guerrero said, hold my Labatt's. I was trying to think of a Canadian beer. Hold my beer because I'm still in this postseason too. Now, of course, the performance that Vladimir Guerrero Jr. did wasn't as legendary as what Ohtani did. However, his 2-run home run in the third inning was critical, an absolutely critical moment because the Dodgers had the lead. And for the first 2 innings, Ohtani was dealing and looked really, really, really solid. And if the Dodgers built up anything resembling a big, huge inning off of Bieber, then this would have been an easy Dodger win. The nanosecond Vladimir Guerrero Jr. hit the 2-run home run to make it 2-1. It didn't mean the game was over. By any stretch of the imagination, it's a 1-run game. And I got news for you. Climate change is real, and it's hot as hell here in Los Angeles in late October. It didn't used to be this hot as hell in late October. And it was in the 90s. And so the ball could carry today. And if Bieber was starting to throw up pumpkins, then there you go. But Bieber pitched well enough to win. Again, he pitched into the sixth. And the Dodgers couldn't get anything going until, a one garbage time run in the ninth inning. And Bieber pitched well enough to win. The one thing that I would have done differently that Schneider didn't do as the manager of the Blue Jays, I would have let Bassett and I said this as I was watching the game, I would have let Bassett pitch the ninth. Bassett pitched well. He threw 20 pitches in his 2 innings. He is a starter. He did pitch 1 inning the other day. And I thought if you have Bassett pitch one of those those weird 3-inning saves that, if you pitch the last 3 innings, no matter what the score is, you get the save. If Bassett got a 3-inning save, then you would save the entire bullpen with the exception of 2/3 of inning by Flaherty. Is it Flaherty or Flaherty? I very rarely say his name out loud. They brought in Varland, and Varland didn't look very good. And for a minute there, I thought oh my, are they going to let him rally? And of course, Hoffman had to get up. If you had Bassett starting the ninth and he got in trouble, you could get Varland up and keep Hoffman in carbonite. But that being said, that's a nitpick. That's a nitpick because they didn't use Hoffman. And Bassett did give them length in the middle of the game. And essentially, Flaherty and Varland are the only relief pitchers who pitched in the marathon game who will probably be available tomorrow. I'm guessing Bassett's not going to pitch tomorrow. But this was Vladdy's time to shine. Vladdy had the terrific game today. It was Vladdy's turn to say, hey, wait a minute, I'm also a superstar who showed up big time to the postseason. He got on base 3 times. He scored 2 runs, including on his 2-run home run and then later on in the game. Barger had another solid game where he got a couple of hits, and they were able to dust themselves off by not having Springer in the lineup. Lucas got a pair of hits, and Lucas and France drove in a run. The Dodgers got a little sloppy in the 7th inning. That turned a 2-1 game into a 6-1 game. And at that point, it felt like, okay, the Blue Jays have taken control. And save for that little hiccup in the ninth, they did. So the Blue Jays are going into this. Essentially, if you had asked 1 million Blue Jay fans at the beginning of the World Series, at the end of Game 4, it's going to be 2-2. If you asked 1 million Blue Jay fans, would they take that? Somehow you'd get 2 million saying, hey, yeah, absolutely. And the Blue Jays did what they had to do. Baseball is the greatest game of them all. You could have a classic marathon like they had on Monday night. Have to come back the next day. You can't let up any momentum. Momentum and storylines like that are always written in retrospect. There's plenty instances of games that have been super dramatic, long, extra inning games where either team has won the next one. The team that won the next game, they got all this momentum. Or the team that lost won the next game, and it's like, oh, well, they were pooped, they were tired. It's always written in retrospect. And the Blue Jays today use their retrospect to take control of the series again. And Dave Roberts, and I'll say it, the general manager, made a critical mistake, not today, But while they were constructing the playoff rosters, and I've mentioned this before, I'm going to mention it again. Do you know why? I'm right. All right, this episode is brought to you by our friends over at PrizePicks. You and I make decisions every day, but on PrizePicks, being right can get you pay. Don't miss any of the excitement of sports this season, whether you're following the NFL, the National Basketball Association, or both, because there's no better time to jump in on the action. If you haven't tried it, PrizePicks is the simplest way to pay and to play. Just pick more or less than on at least 2 player stats. If you get them right, you win. It takes less than 60 seconds to make your lineup, and you can play anywhere PrizePicks operate, including California, Texas, and Georgia. It's a great way to make your football Sundays or the NBA tip-offs even more exciting. If you're pulling for Steph Curry, you're pulling for Mahomes, you're pulling for, I guess, I'm losing track. I don't follow the sports as closely as the other. But do you know what? Here's what you got to do. You got to use the new stacks feature. It's a game changer. You can pick more on Steph's points and threes and assists in the same lineup. Plus, if one of your players leaves early with an injury, the injury reboot saves the lineup from a loss. Download the PrizePicks app today. Use code LOCKEDONMLB to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONMLB for $50 in lineups after your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks. Do you know what? It's good to be right. Landon Knack did not have a very good year this year. He pitched for the Dodgers the first part of the year, and then he found himself in the minors, bounced around a little bit, and the final day of the season he was recalled, and he pitched 3 2/3 innings on the final game of the year when the Dodgers played the Seattle Mariners, and he struck out 7. I would argue that Landon Knack, as big of a question mark as he is a better pitcher to have on the Dodgers roster than Blake Treinen right now. How many times do I have to keep saying the same thing? I would DFA the guy, and I've said that before. And he's had the one big save that he had was in the moment where the Brewers were on the verge of tying that game. And if he had wound up hitting that batter, which he almost did, been yet another blown save. But it was the one Dodger reliever let up a run the other day. And then here we go. What happened today? The Blake Treinen comes in a close game, 2 pitches in, it turns into a big, huge cushion. They put up a graphic during the Fox broadcast today that said, this postseason, Blake Treinen has faced 24 batters and 12 has reached base. That means there's a 50% chance you face Blake Treinen and you're getting on base. I mean, at this point, you have to use him because he's on the roster. Why is he on the roster? Seriously, why is he on the roster? If there was any kind of any sort of controversy of this player is available, this player is not available, why are you going to put him on the roster? Sometimes you take someone, no matter what they did in the past, no matter how much money they're making. You saw in the first couple of rounds, this guy is a can of gasoline that you throw in the fire. I've been saying that for a few weeks, and I've been saying it because I'm correct. Over 32 appearances out of the bullpen in the regular season, his ERA is over 5. That's not a small sample size. And what has he done this postseason? Well, his ERA he pitched 1 1/3 shutout innings against Cincinnati. Oh boy, his ERA against the Phillies was 18. His ERA against the Brewers was 6.75. Going into today's game, his ERA in the World Series was 27. Now, I think it lowered a little bit, but he is throwing batting practice. He should never have been on the roster. If they had put Landon Knack on there, at least you're thinking maybe he can do something. How many times do I have to keep saying the same thing? Do not put this guy into a game unless it's a mop-up situation, the equivalent of a utility infielder pitching. He's the Darko Milicic of this team. He'll pick up a ring if they win, but stay on the bench unless it's a blowout. I don't get it. I don't get it. Exactly how many times does he have to show you that you can't use him in a big situation? He should never have been put on the roster. That's why I don't necessarily just blame Dave Roberts, who, of course, Roberts had him on his team last year, and he was terrific last year. He threw his guts out in that final game against New York in Game 5. He was one of the underrated heroes, pitching, 2 1/3 innings? He pitched more than 2 innings out of the bullpen. That's why they had to use Walker Buehler for the save in the World Series last year, because Treinen came in, and I believe it was a 6. He pitched brilliantly in the 7th, and he got into a huge amount of trouble in the 8th, and he wiggled his way out of it. And yes, was a big part of a World Series championship last year, and got a save in the World Series during the COVID year. So I understand. I get it that Dave Roberts has a certain amount of loyalty to a guy who helped him win 2 World Series titles. But right now, you're trying to win a third. And sometimes you got to take someone off the roster if they're not doing their job. He's not doing his job. And the minute he came in, base hit, base hit, base hit. And what was a close game at that point and a winnable game at that point, now the Blue Jays have home field advantage. And they didn't have to use their high leverage relievers. Now, tomorrow, what do we have in store? Yusevich, who was brilliant in that first game with the Yankees, not so good his first game against Seattle, then pitched well again, was okay the first game against LA. He didn't go that deep into the game. You don't know what you're going to get. You don't know what you're going to get. You may get a great performance, but you also know you have a slightly rested bullpen now after the marathon. Now, the Dodgers throwing Blake Snell, who's been terrific this postseason, save for Game 1 of the World Series, where he did not pitch well, and it forced him to use the bullpen. It's funny, just 1 day after, the LA Dodgers bullpen puts on a masterclass of brilliant pitching, today it went back to the feet of clay example of just get to the bullpen, you'll score enough runs to win. And the Blue Jays have done that twice. Now, at the beginning of the World Series, I did pick the Dodgers to win the World Series. I said the Dodgers were going to win in 6. And Blake Snell can go a long way in making that prediction look accurate. That isn't necessarily because I'm rooting for the Dodgers. What I'm rooting for right now is a Game 7. I had a Game 7, which turns into a showdown between Shohei Ohtani and Vladdy Jr. Which one of these two superstars are going to be the one who leads their team to the World Series title? Let's go through some of the things that people posted on the YouTube page. I was going back looking at all after the 18-inning game yesterday, Nadine Papazian said the Jays are done. All right, Nadine, what do you think about that? Then you have I'm hip 510. By the way, if you have to say you're hip, are you? 510 says it's grossly unfair advantage to the Dodgers over the Jays. Clean sweep, y'all. That's what was said at the beginning of the World Series. Well, there's no sweep. In fact, the World Series is going to head back to Toronto. And the Blue Jays now have home field advantage again. The Blue Jays just win all their home games. You got yourself a World Series title up in Canada. Now, when we were talking about yesterday, Jeremiah from Locked On Marlins and I were talking yesterday about this was a really great classic game. And of course, remember, we were saying it like minutes after the game ended. And I said on the podcast, we're going to have a little bit of distance and perspective before we can really analyze the greatness of this game. Kyle Knapp, 567, seems like a fun guy. So just because it was 18 innings doesn't make it the best. It does not equal that. Nobody could score even on scrub pitchers. Well, maybe you give those scrub pitchers a little bit of a tip of the hat. And I don't call it the best game. I thought it was an excellent game. I thought it was a classic game. I have a hard time calling a game an all-time great game when neither team is facing elimination. That to me is the sign when one team is on the verge of losing it and then, comes back. Kind of like when the Cardinals did that against the Rangers in 2011. I would put that game ahead of what happened the other day. In a deciding game, like the Cubs-Indians game, what I call the Rajai Davis game. Rajai Davis had the most dramatic moment of that game, even though Cleveland wound up losing the game. That was a classic because you had two teams. It was a great game, obviously an extra inning one-run game, but it also was a game where both teams, this was the moment of a lifetime, of multiple lifetimes, and one team was going to come out ahead. And of course, the 91 World Series, when you had those extra inning games where the Braves and the Twins were battling it out, and the Twins facing elimination in 6 and 7. That had a great game 3 as well. That had an extra inning game 3. That was a really great game. But you remember the 2 and 6 and 7, game 6 and 7 more than that. I was thinking also another really, really great game, which was a game 3, was in 2005. Now, that was a clean sweep, that World Series. The White Sox swept the Houston Astros. Back then, the Astros were in the National League. But 3 of the 4 games were really good, were really competitive. You had the walk-off by Scott Podsednik. You had I think it was 15 or 16 inning marathon where Mark Buehler had to come out of the bullpen. And you had Jeff Blum hitting a home run in extra innings to give the White Sox the victory in Houston. That was a really great game and a really, really fun game, but it's never going to be remembered as a great game or a great series because it was a 4-game sweep by the Chicago White Sox. So no, I don't, and you could make the argument that the game between Detroit and Seattle was a more classic game than this one because both teams were facing elimination. But it was a really good game. And if we know we have a game 6, if game 6 is a great game and there's a game 7 that's also a classic, then the 18-inning marathon is going to only have its reputation enhanced because it'll be part of it. But there you have it. We're going to have ourselves, there will be a game 6. The title will not be clinched tomorrow. And we come back, I do want to talk a little bit about some of the teams that may not have been clubs that I rooted for, but in the end, in terms of posterity, it was good that they won. And 3 of those teams won on this day. All right, let's hear from our friends over at FanDuel. The NBA is back, and there's no better place to get in on the action than on FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Even if you miss the start of the game or you want to ride the hot hand, FanDuel has live bets on everything who will score next to the fourth quarter comebacks. You can even combine live bets with a same game parlay for a shot at bigger payout. It keeps getting better every day as every game is super exciting, especially when your team is making that late push. Right now, FanDuel is giving new customers $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So head to FanDuel.com to sign up and play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the National Basketball Association. That was a flawless live read. Thanks so much for making Locked On MLB your first listen today. For second listen, check out the all-night Locked On MLB game night, every game, every night until World Series champion is crowned. And it's not going to be crowned tomorrow. Get local analysis on a national scale. Find MLB game night on Locked On MLB on YouTube or where you listen to your podcast. On this day in multiple years, 3 different teams won the World Series. October 28, 1981. October 28, 1989, and October 28, 1995. 3 different teams won the World Series on this day. In 1981, the LA Dodgers won the World Series. And it was a weird time for them to win the World Series because you had the split season because of the strike. The Cincinnati Reds had the best record in baseball, but because they split the season at the beginning of the strike and coming back from the strike, you had a first half, second half champion. And the Reds were like half a game out of first when the strike hit, and they were half a game out when the second half of the season ended. So the Reds had the best record in baseball and were not allowed to participate in the playoffs. It was so stupid. And the beneficiary of that were the Los Angeles Dodgers, who got in, defeated the Astros in a dramatic series, defeated and broke the heart of Montreal in their only ever postseason appearance. And then down 2-0, they turned the ball to Valenzuela, who got the complete game victory, and the Dodgers ran the table and defeated the Yankees. There's a lot of reason to grind your teeth about the fact that the Dodgers were even in that World Series because of the Reds situation. But I am glad they won in retrospect for this reason. That Dodger team in 1981 had Davey Lopes, Ron Cey, Steve Garvey, Bill Russell. No, not that one, the other one. Dusty Baker, Rick Monday. They had Bert Hooton and Fernando Valenzuela. It had Jerry Royce. It had so many players who were great Dodgers, great Dodgers who had played so many wonderful years and won multiple pennants with the Dodgers. That infield right there of Garvey, Lopes, Russell, and Cey is one of the great infields in the history of baseball. And there would have been something unfair if that team never won a title. So even though they won a weird title, they did win a title. They did. And it made for Lasorda leading that squad to the promised land. I'm glad that group won. It would feel weird if Garvey never won or Lopes or anything. I'm saying that as someone who grew up in New England, a big Boston fan, who saw the Rices and the Fists and the Fred Linds and the Burlesons and the Louis Tiants and the Bill Lees of the world, Dwight Evans and everybody, Butch Hobson, Jerry Remy, George Scott, all of them finishing, never winning a ring. And that stinks. And I'm glad that Dodger crew got to have their moment. Now, I was living in the Bay Area in the 1980s. And while I love a lot of the A's teams over the years, those A's squads from the late 80s were great. And they beat up the Red Sox, so I wasn't a huge fan of them. And they won the Earthquake series. And believe me, I was in the Bay Area. By the end, there was very little enthusiasm to finish that World Series because we were hit with the big dose of reality with that earthquake. But in retrospect, and I was rooting for the San Francisco Giants. My dad, may he rest in peace, was a huge Giants fan. But I am glad that crew that included Canseco, that included McGuire, that included Dave Stewart and Dennis Eckersley, that included Mike Moore and Bob Welch and Terry Steinbach and Tony Phillips, and all of them were able to win a championship because they were a great team, and it wouldn't feel right if in retrospect they didn't have a title. And as someone who grew up in New England, the big Red Sox fan, Dennis Eckersley was a Red Sox for many of the years I followed them. Dave Henderson was one of the great heroes of the 86 Red Sox team. And Don Baylor was also on this. Baylor wasn't on the 89 team. My bad. But Henderson was. Former Red Sox Carney Lansford was. And I'm glad and Hall of Famer Dave Parker, who's right over my shoulder right there, was on that squad. There are a lot of players who were on that squad that I'm glad we're able to get a ring in retrospect. You want to see some teams like that manage to pull it out. And I hated the Bobby Cox Braves. I make no bones about it. I don't remember a time I rooted for them. Maybe against the Yankees, but I got to say maybe, because I just didn't like them. I never liked Bobby Cox. And there's a lot of reasons why I don't like Bobby Cox, but I never root for those teams. I always rooted against them. And October after October after October, I walked away smiling because I didn't like those Brave teams, and they walked away losers almost every October, except 95. Now, I was rooting like crazy for them to win in 95. In retrospect, I wish they had won in 96 or 99. But that team in 95 had Fred McGriff, had the players who associate with the Braves, like Lemke, like David Justice, Ryan Klesko and Chipper Jones, and Jeff Blauser, who's hurt for the World Series, was on that team, and Rafael Belliard, and Javier Lopez. But also, it really would have been bad for the legacy of baseball to have Glavine, Maddox, and Smoltz finish their career without a ring. They deserved a ring. That trio right there was so remarkable, even though I rooted against them. In retrospect, I'm glad they won at least one. Why did it have to be against Cleveland? I don't know. They broke my dad's heart in 1993. Yuck. But the one bad thing was Terry Pendleton had horrible luck because he was a main cog on turning that team around in 1991. Played on the team for the first bunch of pennant winners, was not there in 95, and returned in 96 when it looked like they were going to clobber the Yankees. It didn't turn out. So on this day in 81, 89, and 95, three teams with great cores won their lone title. And do you know what? In retrospect, it's good that some of these players do win it. It's going to lead us to today's trivia question. And it was this. Oh, by the way, Rain City 11 says, Sully, recently discovered you. I really enjoy your analysis and baseball knowledge. Awesome. Welcome aboard, Rain City. And I hope you're a regular listener. Here's a trivia question for today. Who are the only two pitchers to throw a complete game World Series clinching victory against the Los Angeles Dodgers? Not there, a few did it against the Brooklyn Dodgers, but against the LA Dodgers, only two pitchers have thrown a complete game World Series clinching victory. Put your answers right down below. Talking about a much calmer and a much quicker Game 4 of the World Series that suddenly reminds us that momentum is written after the fact. This has been Locked On MLB. I am your host, Paul Francis Sullivan. Please call me Sully.